Hello and welcome to Fortress, Alaska. I'm your host Dave, and today we're going to talk about, is the P320 dangerous? That's the question. Seems there have been a lot of instances with negligent discharges, which most people are claiming to be accidental discharges. The difference being accidental is like usually something went wrong with the gun or something caused it to fire that shouldn't, and a negligent discharge is when you cause it to fire and you shouldn't. I personally feel that most of them were negligent discharges, and the chances of a P320 going off on its own are slim to none. So let's talk about the actual safeties on the Sig P320. So let's start off with, first, we have the takedown safety. So on the Sig P320, this is your takedown lever. It will not engage with the slide forward and the magazine in. And this is done so that you have to clear the gun before you take it apart, because on many sidearms, especially Glocks and numerous others, you have to pull the trigger to take it down. And the Sig, you don't. So even with the slide back, I cannot make the takedown lever go. It won't go, because you also have to remove the magazine. Now with the magazine out and the slide back, you are sure the gun is empty. So now you can turn the takedown lever and proceed to disassemble the gun. So it's that simple. So the takedown safety makes it so it's almost impossible to have a negligent discharge cleaning your pistol, because you must first remove the magazine, second lock the slide back, then use the takedown lever. There's no way you could accidentally get around it. The way rounds are left behind is people will clear their gun with the magazine in it, then drop the slide, then remove the magazine. They have just chambered a round in the gun. With the Sig P320, you cannot disassemble it with just the magazine out. You must also have the slide back. So that's a very safe feature on the Sig P320 that you don't find on a lot of other handguns. So to start off with, that's a safety feature. So it makes it a little bit hard to accidentally shoot yourself. The second safety on the P320 is the sear safety. There are actually two sears. The primary one for when you pull the trigger, causing it to fire, and then there's a secondary one, so should the first one break and the striker will want to move forward, it will catch on the second one. And that's all it really does. It's really not possible for it to hop over the sear because of the machining inside limits it. The striker assembly can't move far enough off the sear to fall forward because there's nowhere for it to go. The secondary sear safety is simply in case the first one should break, it will catch on the second one. So once again, without pulling that trigger, so let's make the sear fall. Without pulling that trigger, it's not going to get and go off. It must have the trigger pulled for that sear to move out of the way and the striker to fall forward. The third safety on the Sig P320 is the striker safety. And basically, this is equivalent to the firing pin safety on, say, a modern 1911 or other hammer-fired firearms, such as a Sig P320 or, I'm sorry, not Sig P320, like a Sig 226 or Sig 229, any hammer-fired gun, name your brand. Almost every modern one will have a firing pin block. So when you pull the trigger, it lifts a little pin up, which allows the firing pin to move. Well, striker fire guns like the Sig P320 often have the same thing. So when you pull the trigger, there's a little bar that moves up, that moves out of the way so the sear can go forward. Without that pull of the trigger, that little bar is in the way and keeps that striker from moving forward. So now you have the issue of the sear has to be out of the way, and then that little bar has to be out of the way. And the only way to get them out of the way is pulling the trigger. The last safety the Sig P320 has is the trigger bar disconnect, and that is your out of battery safety. So if the gun is just a little, well, I won't stay out of battery because this has a good spring. So if it's just a little bit out of battery, the trigger will not pull. So as you can see, I just have it just a hair out of battery, and the trigger won't pull. But as soon as it's in battery, the trigger will pull. So that's what the trigger bar disconnector does. It stops the handgun from firing until it's all the way in battery. And all the way in battery means a slide all the way forward and locked in place. So Those are the 4 main safeties you have with the Sig P320. Safety for when you take it down so it can't accidentally shoot yourself, because there are an awful lot of people with guns that we call Glocks that you have to pull the trigger to remove the slide. And there's a lot of people who do not clear their guns properly. So that's where a lot of accidental discharges happen. And Sig designed to be a way around that. It may not be as simple as a Glock, and there are many more parts than a Glock, but it is safer. Then you have the sear safety, the striker safety, and the disconnector bar. So there are plenty of safeties to keep this gun from going off when it's not supposed to. Okay, so let's talk about what safety this gun does not have, and many of you already know. So let me grab another gun I have over here, which is all cleared. So I don't own any Glocks, so I have to do it with the Ruger LCP. So here you go. This is affectionately known as the trigger dingus. You can see it moving there. And unless you push on that, the trigger won't go back. But as soon as you push on that bar, the trigger will go back. So once again, you can push on this all you want. You can grab it on both sides. It's not going anywhere. You must depress the little trigger dingus to make the trigger go back. So that's the trigger safety. The Sig does not have it. Now, could the Sig benefit from it? Maybe. It has plenty of safeties. If you keep your finger off the trigger, it shouldn't fire. So I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think if you're properly trained and know what you're doing, and your finger off the trigger until you intend to shoot, it's not going to fire. Now, some guns just have an articulating trigger, like Smith & Wesson's would have a 2-piece trigger, and you'd pull and it would articulate and get out of the way. Similar thing of having the trigger dingus, just doesn't have little things sticking out. Honestly, it makes no difference. You can get the trigger dingus style trigger for the Sig. There are aftermarket ones that puts it on there if you decide you need that. It's actually just making the gun another level of safety, but I don't see the need for it. Now, let's talk excuse me, let's talk about the 4 major incidents I have read about concerning accidental discharges with the Sig P320. Okay, the first one was an individual, a female police officer, who had her holstered P320 inside her purse. And if you saw my video about pocket carry, you know that even in a holster in your pocket, you do not put anything else in that pocket, because small items will get in there. The holster is designed to keep gross objects out, not little tiny objects like the front end of keys, coins, other small items that might be in a purse that if they get in there and move around will cause the trigger to fire. So the fact that she had the lack of training and allowed her gun to be put in her purse goes on her training, not on the gun. There was no problem with the gun. If you put a holstered gun into a purse and carry it long enough, it's going to fire, because something will get inside the holster and cause that trigger to move. And that's just how it's going to be. So there was no issue with the gun when that happened. The second instance had to do with a cop. Oh, let me get my holster off. Hang on one moment. So, had to do with the cop sitting around playing like this, doing this with his holster and gun. And what do you think eventually happened? Yeah, he says it just went off. Well, I have a better idea of what happened. So maybe you can think what might have happened if you're sitting around with a loaded gun doing this. Not smart. So we'll put that one on lack of training as well. Now, another issue that happened was someone who had their Sig P320 in a Sig P226 holster. This is a Sig P226 holster. This is a Sig P320. They are not made for each other, as you can see. So, first of all, how he got it in there, I don't know, because mine doesn't fit at all. But they're not interchangeable. Just because they're both Sigs, don't make them interchangeable. So, as you can see, there is definitely a problem when you try to force a P320 into a Sig 226 holster. Now, how he got it in, I don't know. But it accidentally going off when he's pushing it in the wrong holster seems very reasonable to me. So once again, that's a problem with using the wrong equipment with the wrong gun. This is for a 226. This is not a 226. And the final one was a competitor, a shooting competitor. So here we'll Put it back in my lazy man's holster. And his claim is when he lifted his arms up, the gun fired. Well, what would happen if when I holstered this gun, if some of my shirt got down in there? Let's get a little of my shirt in there. Now when I lift my shirt up, oh, it just pulls the shirt out. Imagine that shirt's probably hooked onto that trigger. So he claimed there was no way that happened and that his shirt was not tucked in his holster, because after his gun discharged and he looked, his shirt wasn't in his holster. Well, yeah, because after you lift your arms up, your shirt came up and fired your gun. And his story behind Sig saying that there was a broken part and caused a misfire, all I have to say is if someone at Sig's customer service said that, they should be fired, because that's not what happened. And the part that broke would not cause an accidental discharge. So I don't trust the story. I think there was some confusion going on and people have their facts straight. Option 2 is, because I have seen competitor shooters, they will do this because they think it's a rush to shoot. So they will stick their gun in and put their arms right up. Well, here, bang. Yeah, I was lifting my arms up when it went off. But guess what? If you're not careful and you have a shirt or your finger and you hit it and go up, yeah, bang, it's gone off. So I don't believe that story. I think he's confused or doesn't understand how things work. And so let's look at it from the other point of view. The U.S. military has somewhere in the neighborhood of 600,000 of these pistols. Every military police officer for the Army, security forces for the Air Force, I don't know what they call the ones in the Navy or Marine Corps, all carry Sig P320s. I have not heard of a bunch of accidental discharges in the military. All those troops carrying guns, I don't hear about accidental discharges. Now, I will be fair. The one difference is, and this gun doesn't have it, is on the military guns, they do have a safety. But if the gun's just firing by itself, safety wouldn't make any difference, because all the safety does is keep you from pulling the trigger, won't allow the trigger to move. So if the gun's firing without the trigger moving, the safety doesn't make any difference. So if it's an inherent flaw with it, then it would be happening with the military too. And to be fair, I will point out that yes, Sig did have a drop safety issue where the mass of the trigger was too large at first, and there were some other things. So when it fell, the trigger, through inertia, would keep going back and, in essence, pull itself through inertia. And so they changed the triggers out to be lighter so that they wouldn't have the mass. So when they do take a drop, the trigger doesn't continue to go and pull and fire. Sig corrected that issue. So that's not the issue. We're not talking about drop guns. But once again, I'll say this much. I have been shooting for close to 50 years, maybe more than 50 years. I've never dropped a gun. So I'm not so sure I'm concerned about dropping guns going off. Let's face it, almost any revolver, if it dropped, can go off. So it's just best not to drop your gun. But anyway, but that problem was fixed. So there are the facts about the Sig P320. Is it dangerous? Well, you get to decide. I'm just telling you what the safeties are and my theories about what happened with these people who had, quote, accidental discharges. No, they had negligent discharges, in my honest opinion. So once again, I'm Dave with Fortress Alaska. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, put comments, share, help the algorithm, make a salty comment. There's a joke for that if you watch Bloke on the Range, because I always reply sodium chloride whenever he says that. So anyways, leave some comment, share, subscribe, look me up on Patreon, Facebook, all those regular places. Anyways, have a good day and get out shooting.